Hey, Mike, you're muted right now.
Okay.
Welcome. Hi, folks. So welcome to Free Together, Free Apart, Hacking Family Success. You're in the living room of the Vermont Center for Family Studies, where our mission is to strengthen families and communities by training helpers using Bowen family systems theory. My guest today is probably very well known to most of you, Dr. Michael E. Kerr, MD. He succeeded Murray Bowen as the director of the Georgetown Family Center in 1990, 31 years ago, following a close 20-year association. He's been the emeritus director of the Bowen Center since then, since January 2011, and he's now living in Maine on a very beautiful island. He continues his clinical practice and presents at conferences around the world and writes. And for those of you who follow Dr. Kerr's work on programs like his monthly webcast that he does through the Bowen Theory Academy that he and Kathy Kerr and others run, know that he's a lifelong learner. He's the co-author of Family Evaluation, which is still in print. It was published in '88. That's an accomplishment. And we reread the book last year in our training program, and it's fresh as a daisy. And also, as many of you know, the recently published Bowen Theory Secrets, Revealing the Hidden Life of Families, which I've been saying is the best book I've ever read on Bowen Theory since I read it. He was the founding editor of the journal Family Systems and served there from 94 to 2014. Bob Noon succeeded him at that point. I just want to say one more thing about Mike before we get into a dialogue here, which is that I became a student of Mike Kerr's in 2000 when I attended the Bowen Center's postgraduate program, and I got to start listening to his lectures. And I was always up as early as I needed to be to make sure I was in my seat before that lecture started in the morning. And there's a lot of elements to Mike's expertise as a teacher. His continued passion for adventuring in the world of science, which is very palpable in his writing and his teaching. But I think for me, the most memorable part was the way he very calmly, but very openly shared about his own family, which is a tradition in the Bowen network, as you know. But Mike was just bold, I would say, in that way. And I think set a model for me about the way to do that. It was riveting. And I know that's been true for many of you. So welcome, Dr. Mike Kerr.
Well, thank you. I'd like to keep listening to you instead of talking.
Well, you could ask me a question. Yeah. I think, and I wanted to mention that chapter 16, I think it is in your new book, which I jokingly call Mike Kerr's non-anonymous paper, which I know most of you have read the book and have appreciated that chapter. When I read it, I had an exchange with Mike. I think it's a unique chapter, not just in Bowen theory, but in American literature, in my opinion, because there's just nothing quite like it. The only thing that's a bit like it is the anonymous paper that I know of, in terms of the breadth of the exploration of one's own family using this lens of Bowen theory. Very inspiring. Was it, Mike, did you hesitate or debate with yourself at all about publishing that chapter in the book? It's very personal.
No, I mean, I've been, ever since, let's see, I guess it was 19, I finished my training in Washington in 1971,
No.
and then spent 2 years in the Navy before coming back.
Mhm.
And I think this was done after I got out of the Navy, but Murray Bowen suggested I talk about my own family because he had started
Mhm.
developing a series of videotapes of people's efforts in their own families of origin. So it was with his encouragement that I elected to do that. I showed
Mhm.
the tape we had made, and also presented something alongside of it. Walter Toman was there that year as the guest presenter.
Mm.
And after I finished, he said, well, a youngest would talk publicly about his family like you've done. And I said that, well, Walter, I am a youngest, but I'm not as much of a youngest as I used to be. So,
Yeah, so you've been at it a while.
yeah, for sure.
I wonder, Mike, this is a part of you could call it a tradition in the community of people who are serious about Bowen theory, that you make the effort to not only work on your own family, but talk about it publicly if you're teaching. And do you have any thoughts on the art of doing that well? What are the elements?
Let's see. What springs to mind is an example. I forget where I did this conference, but it included a presentation about my nuclear family and some of the stuff that was going on at that time with my nuclear family, particularly with my youngest son, the third in the row of kids. And it featured, descriptions of what was playing out in the family. And this person in the audience who I didn't know before says, well, is your son still as angry as he ever was? And I said to him, I said, my son was not angry. The triangle was angry. And that took him aback. But I think that's the key. The whole, I think the most important feature of Bowen theory is this concept of emotional objectivity, that it's possible to talk factually about emotional process. And I don't think anybody really recognized that till Bowen did. And then by then constructing a theory, giving a lot more information about how do you make set progress in using this theory. So I don't know. I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time and know it.
I think people sharing family stories is all over American culture, but that element of taking seriously the challenge to see that the angers in the triangle is unique and very valuable.
Yeah, how else do you get neutral if you can't conceptualize it on a broader level? We all get stuck in the cause and effect business, and the only way out, I think, is systems. And I think I've mentioned this to you before. I think the most exciting thing that's going on right now, I've always thought if a systems theory of the individual could be developed, that it would make an easier connection with Bowen theory, not automatic, but because Bowen theory is yet, you might say, another level of biological organization. And our Bowen Theory Academy is going to sponsor a conference next year in October. And the person coming is named Marta Bertoloso. And she's been part of a published book along with another book she wrote herself about rethinking cancer. And what threads through the whole book is the need for systems thinking. There's not a theory base there yet, but that was the same idea with Bowen when he was in NIMH, that he recognized the complexity of what's going on in this family and just didn't focus on the individual. That was a huge step to have the courage to do that. And so, yeah, anyway, it's lots of experiences like that kept me moving in that direction. I was fortunate in taking a child psychiatry fellowship, which I had opted for, gave me an extra year at Georgetown to be with Bowen. And so there was that 2 years of when I was in the child psychiatry program. One of the most useful things Bowen ever said to me was that people in the child psychiatry program thought that I was being too influenced by Murray Bowen and that I needed to attend to that. And so I talked that over with Murray. I don't know if I sent him a note or talked in person, but he thought about it over the weekend. He said, Mike, go to the chief of social work in child psychiatry, go to the head of child psychiatry, and simply say to them, you know, I'm beginning to recognize Bowen theory isn't everything. There are other points of view to be understood. It's complete BS as far as I was concerned, but it worked. I mean, the social worker, she got up out of her seat in her desk, came around the desk, and then asked me to stand up, gave me a big hug. Mike, it's great to have you back. And all the tension died. I realized I was trying to convert the child psychiatry department to Bowen theory, which was crazy.
Yeah.
But until Bowen made that comment, you use the so-called reversal, because I didn't mean a word of it, but responded to the emotional process that was afoot. And it really worked well. Gave me that extra year there and for the Navy. And anyway, so I guess I could go on and on with vignettes, but
Yeah, that'll be just fine. Many of us are involved in mentoring, and I'm wondering in what ways would you say Bowen was particularly effective in mentoring you? You've been very productive. Your books are significant contributions. How did Bowen help? How did he hurt? How did he help?
oh, let's see what to say about that. I put an example in that second book of mine. For people who don't know, I come from a family that produced a schizophrenic offspring, a diagnosis that I don't think really is terribly useful. But that was my family, and I was meeting with Dr. Bowen and talking about the family with him, and I was planning a trip home that weekend, that coming weekend, and so on Monday morning, I got back and had a session with Bowen, consultation, a coaching session, and he asked me, well, how did it go? And I went on and on for about 20, 25 minutes, talking about what had happened over the weekend. And then I I kind of realized that I was just talk, 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 talk. And I really first looked at Murray Bowen sitting across the way, not too far away. And he had what I thought was a smirk on his face. What threw my mind is, what the hell's this guy smirking about? This ain't funny. And that realization helped me see that I'd really gotten stuck over the weekend and didn't appreciate it till I could relate the story to him and him not get all mixed up in it with me. And he didn't really have to say a word to do that. And so experiences like that were very important. I think I did put that one in my second book.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did. It's a very elegant story. There's a tremendous efficiency in the intervention that you're describing.
Yeah.
And it's really more in his mind, not in his words.
Yeah. What it means to be, I mean, he was doing it, what it means to relate to an emotional system and be outside the system. I mean, that's a very hard idea to grasp. But I think that was key, and that's what he was doing. He just didn't get into my system, although he was listening carefully and relating to me in a,
Yeah.
fair way.
I wanted to ask you, I'd mentioned this in our pre-interview discussions or emails, about your own work as a coach, as a Bowen theory coach. So there's a story of Bowen's coaching. And I think for you, it's a lifelong journey. And I was kind of curious, what are some of the later learnings, the more recent discoveries about that, the art of doing it well, that have been meaningful to you?
Well, I think one of the most important observations I ever made, and I didn't put this in my book because it was about my own kids and the triangles in our nuclear family. And I didn't think that was fair to them to discuss that in detail. So I didn't do it. But I can pull this moment back just real clearly in my mind, where I was seeing a fellow in my practice, end of the day, and his wife. And he was describing his situation in his nuclear family. And on the way home, it just dawned on me as I was driving, I'm doing the same thing he's doing. It never occurred to me before that. And so when I got home, there's a palpable tension between my wife and one of the kids. And suddenly I saw that. And I saw myself want to retreat from that, thinking, Kathy's too anxious, she's too directive. And I realized in my pulling back that was part of what she was reacting to, her 50% and my 50%. And that's what I think of as emotional objectivity. It's putting, instead of assigning the cause to either person, to really commit to the idea that it's a two-way street always. So what I did that night is I saw what I was doing, and I kind of then moved back toward her, criticism toned down. And I realized with me in this triangle, she's never going to be able to work it out with my son. I was in the way. And she said that was one of the most helpful things that she remembers of the nuclear family changes. I like Murray's comment often. You work on the nuclear family, you get bogged down. You go back, you work on the extended family, you get bogged down. So you keep going back and forth, so you don't get so bogged down. and that flexibility of moving in and out. And I think that also my interest in the natural sciences, the biological sciences, has always been very helpful to me. And as the years are going on, I think I'm real excited about this conference we're going to do next year because of the systems biology. The title of the conference is Systems Biology Meets Bowen Family Systems Theory and Symptom Development. It's going to be, she's going to focus on cancer because she's written a lot about that, but it goes beyond cancer. So that's why we just called it symptom development. But I think that was Bowen's hope, that people would stay connected to the natural sciences. Mm-hmm. And I think I've spent my life trying to disprove Bowen theory because you can't prove it yet. But I keep looking for things that would alert me to the fact that there's a discrepancy between what's coming out of the fact-based natural sciences and what Bowen theory is talking about. And I haven't found it yet. And if I do find it, I may get a job as sternman on a lobster boat up here in Maine. Forget about the whole damn thing. I'll be so shocked.
I like your story of getting out of the triangle by moving towards the wife.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know about it, Dr. Kerr's teaching is quite available through the Bowen Theory Academy with this monthly webcast. And I really enjoyed a few months ago an update. I've been listening to you talk about cancer and a systems view of cancer for 20 years, and tremendously influential in my relating to disease processes of all kinds. And the unit disease concept is a very special achievement. So, but I was just kind of happy for you too, that you found this Finnish, well, she's Dutch, but she's working in Finland for sure. And I wondered what it's been like for you. You were talking about things 20 years ago. I heard you talk about things that then I would see in the paper, New York Times, say 10 years later, about cancer. Were there times, are you surprised at these discoveries? Are you that people like Bartoloso, this philosopher of science in Italy, and Verschuren, this professor in Finland, she organized a conference I saw called Goodbye Flat Biology, with a team of people, a group of people in Europe who are interested in this systems biology, and that her discoveries about a systems view of cancer and the idea that there's a cancer fostering state of the multicellular system. I was just kind of happy for you that there's people kind of joining into what you've been working on.
Well, in the book I'm rereading is by a physicist, and he makes, I think, a rather bold statement. He said, there is no level of causality, period.
For cancer.
Cancer.
Is this Davies and the physics of cancer? Are using physics?
Yeah, this is Frank Wilczek, he's a physicist. Davies.
You want to hold the book up to show it?
Well, let me see if I don't have the. Yes, here it is. I have the cover. So I don't make any money off buying his book, but
10 Keys to Reality. This is a bold.
It's a very readable book, and anyway, this.
So he's not talking about cancer, but physics in this statement that you made.
Yeah, any complex system. Once you address and accept these systems are too complex to assign cause anywhere. I think it's a very important thought because everybody is either into self-blame or blame to one degree or another. And how do you get beyond that so that you can more objectively see process and coming to accept there's no level of causality, no privileged level of causality. It's all part of a system process. And cancer seems to be a really good example of that, although but that's you can't leave out any one variable and have the complete picture.
Are you surprised by these developments, people like Verschuren and Bartoloso, or would you say, no, not surprised?
Delighted would be
Yeah.
more the word I would choose, because I didn't realize how close those folks were coming to seeing, well, the cancer folks, I think, have been forced to recognize that I think it was I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, Robert Weinberg, who discovered the first oncogene back in the early 70s, I think it was. Very well-known, respected researcher. And somewhere in Bartolosso's book that I read, Philosophy of Cancer. And when I saw that book, Philosophy of Cancer, I said, what the hell is that? I mean, I never thought about cancer and philosophy. But it gave me a new appreciation of what some of these philosophers can contribute. And I think she's a beautiful example of that. Philosophers of science. So, yeah, I was surprised to see it come along and just absolutely delighted that this was happening because it's so in sync with Bowen theory.
I'm really looking forward to that meeting and hearing the interaction unfold there.
Yeah, well, I have an email this morning that from her, and we've settled on a date, and I've given her wide leeway. I think she's really taking an interest in what we're doing too. I mean, I think it's mutual. It'll be, I think, a unique conference. It'll be virtual, probably still.
Soon, I'm going to pivot here and allow our audience members to have a short breakout experience and interact in groups of 3. And as I think such an important part of the learning process is thinking out loud for yourself. So I'll allow Mike not to do all the work here. But before that, just tracking this, what you're talking about, this kind of radical no cause view of reality. I wonder if you want to share anything on the virus. You know, it's so topical. It's so polarized. How has that influenced your view of that?
By the virus, I assume you mean COVID.
Yes, the most famous virus of
famous virus in our time.
of the year.
Yeah, and probably not the last. I go with Jane Goodall. I think she was one of the people that said this, that we've just so deeply penetrated into the natural world in an irresponsible way that this is a response to that. I can't say that I fully understand what she means, but I think that it has to be thought of on a societal level, not just an individual or at the level of the particular cancer. It's much bigger. So I forget now exactly what you asked me to say about that.
Well, I think you answered. Just how your system's view of nature and and disease process, how that has informed your observations of what's going on with that virus and the process in society. So
Another story I'll tell, I don't think I put in the book, is when I came back from the Navy, Bowen had started what was called a think tank on Monday evenings. They would bring all of us together who were the burgeoning faculty of the family, eventually the Family Center in 75. And it was aimed at encouraging more research and ways to approach research. And then about that time came Nixon's war on cancer. And I remember Dr. Bowen and I were driving away from Georgetown Hospital. And he said, Mike, cancer is not a pathology. It's a natural process, and it has to be understood as a natural process. And that was a very useful comment to me, to think about it that way. And I think that's where things are moving now more, that it's somehow part of a natural process that we don't fully understand. And I think the concept of regression is going to be, of course, a key one in that and that continuing search. But the physicists, I mean, it's all got to be stacked on top of each other, and it's top down and it's bottom up. It's both.
Yeah, you mentioned this holobiotic guidance system.
Oh, yeah.
In your talk, that there's a holobiotic guidance system, and that cancer involves part, just to see if I'm tracking this, that the tumors is now relating to a sort of a subset of this holobiotic guidance system. I think she called it a niche that is cancer promoting, this niche.
Yeah, you treat the niche and not the cancer. I mean, it's really been a failure to try, with some exceptions, but by and large, the cancer field has not accomplished nearly much at all toward its goal, except with a few exceptions for reasons I don't know that I fully understand, but what makes for these exceptions. This book, I'd invite people to read this one too. This is called The Music of Life. Mm-hmm. And it's written by Dennis Noble. And it was cited in another book I was reading called The Rethinking Cancer I mentioned earlier. But it's a beautifully written book that just flows with systems ideas, presented in a very accessible way. I forget.
Yeah, I'm enjoying. I started that book, and just very striking to have such a senior geneticist take on the fundamental, most common way people think of genes, which is causal. And he substitutes an opposing metaphor of genes as prisoners. Yeah. Prisoners of the system. Can't do anything, can't do a single thing without help from all these other processes.
Yeah, and that the genes are like a DVD, and you look at a DVD, it doesn't tell you very much. You put it into a machine that's very complex, and out comes the music. And just that idea that there'd been too much focus on genes as the guiding thing. That's the bottom up causality. And it's no more bottom up than it is top down.
Sometimes it upsets me when I see people, get really afraid that they've got the wrong gene. And I think that that way of thinking about it promotes that kind of fear. You're back to this treat the niche, not the tumor. And I guess that would involve reestablishing connection to the holobiotic milieu that is something more holistic than the niche, that has to do with the health of the entire body, not the needs, if you will, of the niche, and how to make that reconnection. That's very similar to what you said about the angers in the triangle. This is just a very parallel thinking process. Don't treat the angry kid. Treat the niche and reestablish connection to something bigger.
Yeah, I'd like to think that idea is exactly the way you presented it, that it really is that way.
Mhm.
As Murray liked to say, there's the way you say it is, there's the way I say it is, and there's the way it really is, and not to get pulled out of
Oh,
shape.
and we'll go to the breakout in a sec, but you've experimented and been fascinated by striking cancer recovery stories. And I think this puzzle, how would you get the system to restore the intelligence of the holobiotic guidance system, the guidance system that would be health promoter? That is a major puzzle. How to actually do that, how to stimulate that shift in the biology or in the symptom producing processes of the family. I remain unsatisfied. I want big victories, the processes that would get that outcome. Very fascinating. I think it's the right idea, and it's a very different idea.
Yeah, as Bowen liked to say, where did my theory come from? He said, I was just listening to a distant drum beat that's gone back through time. And somehow I heard it. And I just wrote down the theory. I mean, the idea that it's a different way of looking at the world.
It starts with that.
Yeah, it's
doesn't hurt to be a good writer like Bowen was. And pretty energetic.
Yeah, I mean, what a gutsy that presentation he did about his own family. You remember, and the write up from that people were just, what's this all about? And but he had the courage to stay with that. Interestingly, the bad news this last week was Waverly, Tennessee, getting hit by these huge storms. And that's
his hometown, and
his hometown. Yeah,
out there in that bold move when he presented that at a time when nobody was doing that. So all these presentations we hear in the Bowen network, they kind of go back to that one. True pioneer. So let me pause for a moment now, and just it's delightful to talk to Dr. Kerr, and we'll come back. I'm just going to give you all maybe 5 minutes. Before doing that, I just want to highlight again, here's his recent book. Here's the 88 book, fresh as a daisy. Here's the Bowen Theory Academy. You can check out the website, and there's a lot of products and wonderful ways to learn that are available through that. And we have a conference coming up on spirituality and family health. This is our 4th conference in a row on meditation. How does it relate to Bowen family systems theory? Is there something there that could help reestablish the holobiotic milieu? Dr. Arno Delorme, very interesting guy I've met. He's very excited about this conference. He's a professional researcher. His main area is brain mapping software. That's what he does with UC San Diego. But with the Center for Noetic Sciences, he's involved in ESP research. So Bowen was interested in this ESP as a possible, tell us something about the family system. The fact that maybe 2 people could know something that they shouldn't know. How does that happen? What does that tell us about the family system? So I'm excited to hear Arno and hear him share more of his ideas along with some of the other presenters here. And we're going to have a preview of that next week if you want to come in and just give it a little taste, a free preview. By the way, this meeting and this conference would not happen without the sponsorship of Pomerleau Real Estate, and this conference in particular, Suzanne and Nordbrew are helping us with that. Thank you to those folks. So what I'm going to do now is use the breakout function in Zoom to give you an opportunity to just integrate some of what you've heard and talk together about some of the ideas. And I'll set this up for 7 minutes. So after 7 minutes, we'll all come back, and then I'll give some of you a chance to ask Mike questions or interact with Mike some, and close out the hour that way. See you soon. That'll just take about a minute for the Zoom app to do its thing. It's really quite an amazing app, I think. So easy to use, including this breakout function. I'm looking forward to the further developments of the Zoom app. We can get really great hybrid meetings. That's going to be a challenge for the Vermont Center for Family Studies. Let me just say a few more things before we give you a chance to interact with Mike and share some of your thoughts. One is just how much we appreciate those of you who support us. We run on a lot of volunteer energy. We have for 25 years, and the support is very inspiring when it comes in. Doesn't matter how big it is. Dave Galloway said it well in this quote, I thought, so I put it up there. Dave Galloway from Vancouver has been supporting us. And it's really great not to charge for this. And we can't do it without our donors. And also, we keep the prices for our professional training program low, part of the tradition of the Bowen network. And again, that's with the help of our donors. We do have some scholarships available for that. I think there's one more left if a person works in a nonprofit organization for this year. It's getting late, but here's a summary of our training program. I'll just let you glance at that. We start in September every year. Just want you to know it's out there. There's a couple things too that you can purchase through our website, another way to support us. I thought this conference was very successful. Dr. Dickinson and Kim Ziegelman did a very, very good job. And you can hear what they had to say for $95, as well as the one we did with Walter Smith. This was a real deep look at social impact models. Walter's thinks outside the box, and he also has an amazing presence. And if you want to hear a little bit about that for free, we have 2 recordings of Walter on from this show, which is always recorded and put up on YouTube for free. Mike, how was your small group experience? I think you might be still muted.
Knows that. Anyway, it's a lot of familiar faces out there. It's nice to see all of you and many new faces.
So if somebody want to make a comment, just jump in and share what you're thinking about briefly. We've got about 9 more minutes. So if you have a question for Dr. Kerr, just want to share something. First person can just go ahead and jump in and start talking. Just unmute yourself and start talking. And then if
I had a quick question. And then I have to go to the physical therapist, so I'm going to put you in my pocket and hope that I'm still on mute while I go there.
Okay.
I have my dad living with me. He's 94.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of triangles, including my mother who isn't here anymore, for instance. There's my sister and I who are, I'm going to get a divorce from her, hopefully, after this. My dad, people I vent to. So I'm thinking of triangle as a verb more than a noun. But I didn't know what you thought quickly about that. Sometimes people who aren't even here anymore are part of the triangle, even though they're sort of imagined.
That's an interesting question. Thank you. What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can die and still be part of a triangle in the family for years and decades and decades.
It's good to know you can still cause some trouble even after you die.
Well, my mom actually sometimes was my ally. And now that she's gone, she isn't there. But also, I think my dad imagines that I'm her sometimes and thinks that I want to watch the same shows that he does and that kind of thing. So that's kind of part of it too. So.
Mhm.
I have a question about the niche concept. I was curious what that is. And when you say treating the niche, that's a fascinating concept. And I'd like to hear a little more about that.
It'd be the same idea as that if a family comes in with an acting out teenager, instead of just focusing on the teenager, you look at the system as a whole and see how that's playing out in a set of relationships. So I think that's the same idea. In the niche idea, as I understand it, from, for example, with cancer, like you get presumably parts of the body that are, for one reason or another, are vulnerable to having cancers develop in them. And of course, the traditional treatment, I think, has been to try to kill the cancer. And I think the new idea, and I don't know how well developed it really is how do you change what's going on in the niche, everything that's surrounding the cancer in the local area, say the kidney or the bowel or prostate, what have you. I think that's what it's getting at. It's just, I think it's the same idea as I say with treating the family. You don't focus, you don't ignore, but you don't focus the identified patient, so to speak. You look at the larger niche or system of the family unit. Is that clear?
I have some notes in front of me from Mike's talk on this topic, and I'm just going to share a couple quotes. So this isn't a quote, but I think the idea that the cells of the body get lost in a cancer fostering niche. In other words, a sequence of interactions with other parts of the body that are cancer fostering. And this Verschuren, this researcher, Dutch researcher who's working in Finland, quote, that they become, quote, uncoupled from the fitness of the homeostatic organism. And they begin to adapt to a niche versus this holobiotic, whole organism intelligence.
Ah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit almost like the niche is cut off from the wholeness of the body. Does that make sense to you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fairly new idea, and it's hopefully gradually going to influence how research is done, and just. But as I say, I think it's very similar to dealing with a family. You don't necessarily focus on the symptomatic one to pull the family up, but you do look for a way that the family system can be modified by some other person maybe in the system. And that allows the symptomatic person to function better.
And yeah, I mean, goes without saying, but if you haven't read it, there's a chapter in Mike's new book on the unit disease concept, which is just very clearly lays out the foundational ideas that lead to this. Anybody else want to get in and make a comment? Or I see a couple of someone's recommending a book, Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our Worlds. And someone says, I went to physical therapy for knee pain, and all the therapist focused on was my hips and legs and strengthening them. Not the knee, but the hips and the legs. We have
Eric, I was paired with Nord Brew, and we were talking about people getting cancer, and he related that he's got one branch of his family where everybody gets cancer, but it doesn't kill them, and there's another branch where everyone gets cancer and it does.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
Mhm.
I would agree.
Mike, what do you think of, I mean, you said there hasn't been much progress. I hear other people regularly saying there's been tremendous progress in keeping people alive who had cancer and understanding the complexity of in this new generation of immune treatments that people are excited about. Is that a movement? Are the immune treatments a movement in the directions of the system's view of cancer, or would you say no, not really?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know I have a good friend here on Islesboro who has I think it's a B cell lymphoma, and it's become a chronic illness, and periodically he needs to be treated for it, but then it behaves like a chronic illness. It doesn't look like it's ever going to even shorten his life. And that's a pretty successful outcome, and I think many people in the cancer field think that way, how to turn it into a chronic illness instead of one that can kill somebody. It doesn't mean that ongoing, certainly I would line up for ongoing medical therapy of some kind if I was diagnosed, but wouldn't count on that. There was a study done, quite a few years ago now, where they went to the cancer registry of various hospitals, and they looked for people in the registry who were supposed to have been dead by now, and interviewed all these people because they were supposed to be going to be dead, and looking for what did they do. And they broke down in a split between people who said, I went to the doctors and I said, you give me everything in your armamentarium and throw it at me. I'm not scared of it. All the way over to people who said, if I don't get out of this hospital right now, you people are going to kill me. And both of those people could survive. I think it's just a very interesting, thought-provoking piece of research that there's something there beyond what we're seeing.
If you want to hear the rest of the story that Steve started to tell, what I shared with him was in the mid-'80s, my mother was diagnosed with advanced terminal ovarian cancer, not survivable. But she died last May, just short of her 99th birthday. And every single person in my family of origin had cancer. My son, well, there are three of us in our nuclear family who have had cancer. My son observed everybody in our family gets cancer, but nobody dies of it. Now, my mother had a sister, and in that family, everybody gets cancer and they die of it. And I don't know. So I'm intrigued by your no level of causality notion. This is very fascinating. I don't know what that's the story. So my mother later got a bowel cancer, again, a terminal thing, but she died when her heart and her kidneys finally went to war with each other, just short of her 99th birthday. So I hear what you're saying, Mike. Thank you for that.
Okay, Nord.
Well, Mike, in closing, just want to thank you for spending some time with us. Real excited about this conference coming up and your continued lecture series next year. And we will be advertising and sharing with this group the details about how to register for that conference. And it's great that we haven't solved everything. It makes things funner, more enjoyable to be puzzling with interesting people who are looking at new ways to think about things.
The one thing I'll say added about the conference,
Mhm.
which we're addressing right now, but having a speaker who's 6 hours ahead of people here on the East Coast, 9 hours ahead of people on the West Coast.
Yeah,
And how do you make that into a conference
yeah. It's a good
where
one.
it can work for her?
Mhm.
Because for her, the conference goes to 5 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Yeah,
2 days in a row.
it's a new puzzle for the
Yeah.
world.
But she's agreed to that. I'm actually, she has a busy schedule, and that actually may have helped her out. Okay, well,
Thanks again, Mike.
hey,
Take
thanks.
care.
Thanks for the interest.
Bye, folks.
Goodbye.